So my husband took me on this romantic ski trip, right? Well, it turns out it wasn't so romantic for me because tragedy struck. And then I learned after what happened of the ski trip, something else. Something very deep. And it's something that my husband's been up to for a while now. And it's led me to the route of one word: revenge. I had a carefree childhood growing up in a traditional American family in the Midwest. I put a lot of effort into establishing my freelance writing career after graduating by accepting a variety of assignments and developing my portfolio. I enjoyed the challenge of always learning and developing as a writer, even though it wasn't always easy. I always loved the feeling of independence that came with me just being my own boss. After college, I did a few odd jobs while finishing my first novel. After I finished it, I sent it over to a few publishers in the hopes of getting a response. When I received an invitation from one of them to attend a book signing at a nearby bookstore and bring along copies of my books, I couldn't believe my good fortune. I was anxious but yet excited because it would be my first opportunity to speak with them directly. At the book event, I saw a man standing at the door, looking around with interest as I sat up to my table and placed my books. I suddenly felt attracted to it, but I brushed it off as I concentrated on getting ready for the occasion. A few minutes later, as I was signing a copy of my book for a fan, the man approached me and said, "Hi there." He said it with a smile. "I'm Will. I saw your book online and thought I'd come check it out." So we strike up a conversation, and I was immediately struck by his intelligence and wittiness. We chit-chatted for a bit about books, writing, and life in general, and before I knew it, the event was over. As we said our goodbyes, Will handed me his business card. If you ever need any help with your writing, don't hesitate to reach out." Will and I started talking on the phone and exchanging emails throughout the coming work weeks. He was literally, an agent who was considering taking on my representation. Not only had I met this incredible man, but I had also discovered someone who thought highly of my work. I was successful in getting publication agreements for my debut book thanks to Will's assistance. I had always wanted to be a published novelist, and now my dreams was finally coming true. Will and I got closer as I worked on edits and revisions, and we went on dates, shared our aspirations, and realized we were a great match. He was gracious, encouraging, and made me feel like I could conquer the world. Will asked me to marry him after we dated for a year. He took me to a beautiful restaurant. We later strolled down the beach, and when the stars were out, I started crying as soon as he got down on one knee and took out that ring. I answered without thinking twice. A few years later, we were wedded in a private ceremony in front of our loved ones. A lovely day full of love and joy had just passed. We moved in together and started to create a life. We welcomed a boy and a daughter into the world during the following few years. Although it was a busy and difficult year, it was also the most rewarding experience of my life. Will was a fantastic father who was kind, understanding, and always there for the kids and me. See, our life was pretty much mundane, until the day that it wasn't. I was sitting in the living room one afternoon trying to get past, a bout of writer's block, when Will entered the room and he had a large grin on his face, and he sat at my desk and was, concentrating on the computer screen. Will greeted me with a simple, "Hello." So I greeted him back and continued to concentrate on my computer screen. He then said that he had a surprise for me, and I asked him what that surprise was, and he said that we were going on a trip. A skiing trip straight to Alaska, holding up 4 plane tickets as he spoke. I protested, telling him that I didn't know how to ski. He replied reassuringly, "Hey honey, it's okay. He was an expert and he'd teach me in a day." I was unable to refuse his offer, I'll be honest with you, and over the next few days we planned and packed for the trip. Although I was a bit nervous, I was also excited about spending a week in the snow with Will. I could not say no to that. We spent the next few days planning and packing for the trip. Yeah, I was nervous, but also thrilled at the idea of spending a week in the snow with Will. The day before we left, I came back from work to find Will waiting for me with a surprise. He told me that he had one more thing for me. I asked him what it was, and he drew out a pair of ski boots, right from behind his back. He said he wanted me to have the best gear possible for our little trip. I was touched by his thoughtfulness. I thanked him and hugged him to show my appreciation. What's up, guys? Mr. Reddito here. Today's story is a deep one. We were just getting a little bit of context, it seems like, from the very first post by OP, but the update gets a little, just sit back and get ready to enjoy. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe for daily animated narrated stories. And here is update 1. The start of the vacation simply was incredible. To go to the resort, we took a plane to Alaska, hired a car. The landscape, which included snow-covered mountains, frozen lakes, and a white-walled forest, was breathtaking. The first 2 days were spent at the resort. We were just taking lessons and practicing on the easy slopes. I was quite aback by how quickly I learned it, to be honest, which I do credit to Will's patient instruction and support. Will recommended that we go skiing on a hill outside the resort on the 3rd day after putting the kids to bed. Will did insist, even though I was concerned since I didn't want to take the chance of getting hurt or getting lost. He told me to trust him and that it was going to be absolutely amazing. I should just wait and see. We dressed in our ski gear and ventured outside in the dark. The sky was clear with stars, and it was chilly outside. My heart was beating quickly from all the excitement, and a tiny bit of anxiety rose in me. I experienced an adrenaline surge as we began skiing down the hill. I could see Will form ahead of me, effortlessly gliding down the slope in the soft, fluffy snow. He calls back, "Hey, honey, stick close to me." Well, I made every effort to move in the same direction as him. Skiing was exciting, but let me tell you, it was difficult. The hill was steeper than any grade I've ever attempted, and the strain was making my legs burn. I yelled, "Slow down, Will," feeling like I was going too fast. But Will did not slow down. In fact, he seemed to be going faster, and faster almost recklessly. He did a flip on his ski and then stopped and looked at me. He told me to give it a try. Perplexed, I told him that it was way too advanced for me. A flip? He told me to stop being a coward. Just try it. He would guide me through every single step. Well, upon his continued insistence, why not? He held onto my arms while I was getting into position. I started skiing and went faster and faster as I came to a particularly sloping part of the hill. He shouted at me to try it, then abruptly let me go, boosting me into the air in progress. Airborne, I tried to go backwards to do the flip, but overshot and landed hard on my back, and I was in great pain. The momentum carried me for a little bit until a rock hit my head, and, well, I don't remember it after that. With a sharp backache, I woke up in a hospital bed. I was lost, puzzled, until I looked down and looked at Will seated next to me, his face etched with dread. He said he was relieved I was awake and that he had been worried he might lose me. In an effort to piece together the sequence of events that had led me to my current state, I inquired about what happened. He said that I had done an unsuccessful flip on the ice and broke my back. I was astonished as the recollection resurfaced. He admitted his guilt and acknowledged responsibility for forcing me to such a dangerous maneuver on my 2nd day of skiing. He had asserted there was no risk and claimed to be an expert. He proceeded beseeching forgiveness and clarifying that he had simply sought to demonstrate the thrill of skiing and that he never meant for anything like this to ever happen. I listened to him while going numb from agony and astonishment. He described to me how I had fallen off the cliff and how he had called out in a panic. People from the resort rushed over soon after, and I was brought to the hospital, where I spent hours in and out of surgery. I questioned how serious it was, absolutely dreading the response I was going to get. Will's expression, it became somber as he replied in a broken voice, stating that it was horrible and that I had shattered my back in multiple places. And I mean multiple. The thought of being in excruciating pain for an extended period was daunting, but the possibility of never fully, recovering was simply terrifying. When I asked him why he thought that, he hesitated for a moment before explaining that the doctor had some injuries that he said were extensive and that I might not be able to ever walk normally again. Yeah, so you can say that the news was absolutely devastating. And I felt tears welling up in my eyes as he continued to speak. "I could use a wheelchair for the rest of my life," he added, adding that we could not be sure just yet. I was struck hard by the realization that my life might never be the same and could not help but feel absolutely despondent. I had always been an active person, so the idea of spending the rest of my life in a wheelchair, well, that was absolutely terrifying, and I mean it, terrifying to the core. Will wrapped his arm around me and hugged me as I struggled to process the news. He tried to comfort me, but I could not get rid of sense of hopelessness. Well, that he had crept into my heart. Later that day, when the doctor saw me, he confirmed that Will had told me. He continued by outlining the significant care I would require, which would involve numerous operations, physical therapy, and rehabilitation. He cautioned me that the path would be lengthy and hard, both mentally and physically. I had a wave of hopelessness just wash over me as he was speaking. The notion of receiving so much treatment was daunting, and the idea of spending the rest of my life in a wheelchair was simply intolerable. As I inquired about the pricing with the doctor, I was filled with anxiety. How would I afford the necessary medical care? My mind began to spin with the potential roadblocks due to the stress of trying to pay for my care and worry of astronomical medical cost. I questioned whether I could even afford the procedure. The doctor acknowledged my worry and simply nodded, basically telling me sympathetically in response. Although the procedure would be expensive, he informed me that there were funds available to support me. Well, he indicated that there were programs that even offered financial assistance and medical bills that could be paid, that they could work with my insurance just to cover most of the cost. His remarks gave my heart a little bit of gleam of hope and relief, but it was swiftly dashed by the truth of circumstances. The prospect of many surgeries and several months of recovery felt like an impossible challenge that I simply just wasn't ready for. My life had irreparably changed, and as I lay here in the hospital bed, my thoughts racing with all the possibilities, I was facing simply protracted and uncertain path to rehabilitation as my hopes and aspirations for the future had been absolutely crushed. But even though I was in pain and afraid, well, I knew I couldn't quit. I could not. I had to muster the courage to push through this and achieve the highest level of potential that I could. And I was simply just confident that I could succeed since Will and my family were behind me every step of the way. Update. I had a long road to recovery ahead of me once I was discharged from the hospital. My back injury left me in chronic pain and entirely unable to carry out fundamental duties that I used to take for granted. Even after receiving intensive physical treatment, without a wheelchair or cane, I'd hardly be able to move. And even then, the pain was intolerable. I had a hard time accepting this new reality. Despite always being a self-sufficient person, I was now compelled to rely entirely on others. I wasn't even capable of caring for my own kids. I was burdensome to the family, and it only made me feel worse. And to make matters even worse, I had poor riding. I was unable to sit at my desk for extended periods of time due to my disability, and even when I tried to write, I found it difficult to concentrate. It simply made me feel more hopeless, and I felt as though I had lost my sense of direction. Even though my husband tried his best to be there for me, he found it difficult to comprehend what I was going through. He had always been so upbeat and happy, yet whenever he looked at me, I could see the fear in his eyes. Even though I knew he was trying his best, it did not help my situation. Update. Hey guys, new update. I can still clearly recall the day. Will surprised me with the first in a long time of disappointing news. See, I was in my wheelchair and looking out the window as we were sitting in the living room. I needed to talk to him as he entered the room, and he said I asked him what it was about as I turned to face him. He responded that it's because my medical bills were mounting and we were unable to pay them. So I questioned him as to what he meant when he said, and I quote, "We can't afford them." He paused before responding that he hadn't paid them. I said that I wanted to know why he hadn't paid them yet. Will said that he could not bear the additional financial strain of my hospital cost because he had been devoting all of his income to the house, the kids, and even their bills. His avoidance of eye contact made it clear that he was uncomfortable with the conversation. I had an upsurge of rage and betrayal. How could he hurt me in this way? He was the only one who caused my accident, and he was now deserting me when I needed him the most? Incredulously, I said that you're telling me that you can't pay my hospital bill because you've been busy spending all the money on the house and the kids. He shrugged, saying that he was sorry and that he was doing the best that he could given the circumstances. So I went ahead and asked him what he wanted me to do and what he thought the solution to the problem would be. He said that, well, he thought that I should get a job again and start contributing to the expenses. He repeated that I needed to figure my own stuff out without burdening him in the process. I was angry, I was hurt, and frustrated as I watched him exit the room. How was he able to be so cold? I was afraid and I was alone, unsure of how I was going to support my family and pay the hospital cost at the exact same time. I became aware that my life had changed significantly. As I sat there in my wheelchair and looked out the window, I had changed from the person I had been before the disaster. I was more dependent on others because I was weaker and way more vulnerable. Well, yet I was aware that I still had a long and arduous journey ahead of me, both mentally and physically. So the following day, I obsessively thought about my talk with Will. Despite having caused my injury, he refused to contribute towards my hospital expenditures. I understood that my only option was to resolve the situation on my own. I needed to make so much changes in my life as soon as possible. Update number 4. Hey guys, so I got up and the next morning I went on the phone and spoke with my former publisher. Well, we haven't spoken in a while, so I hoped I'd still be open to working with me. He greeted me pleasantly as soon as I responded, and saying that it was Erica speaking. He then inquired as to how I was, and I said that things had been absolutely difficult. Well, when he questioned me about what had been going on, I started telling him about my accident and subsequent lengthy hospitalization. The next time he spoke, I could hear the shock in his voice as he expressed sympathy for me. He finally, and I really do mean finally, said that we need to get back on track after a brief pause. I was informed that my readers were excited to hear from me once more and that they've been waiting for my next book for quite some time now. He followed by saying that we were considering a new series and would love for me to be a part of it. The information I was hearing absolutely astounded me. Even after everything that's occurred to me, I still had a chance to bounce right back. I responded that it sounded fantastic, and inquired about the follow-up to my previous book in an exuberant tone. He stated that it was definitely still an option, but for the time being, we should concentrate on this new series we've been working on. He said that we could talk more about the sequel later. I expressed my gratitude to him for the chance, and we scheduled a meeting to go through the specifics. I had a wave of relief as I hung up the phone. Perhaps things were now beginning to improve. This was definitely the first step, but it wasn't enough. I knew what I needed to do next. My buddy Nick and Audrey were more than ready to assist me when I reached out to them. They had always been very kind to me, and I felt I could rely on them pretty heavily. Audrey answered the phone when I called. Audrey inquired as to how I was doing, and I responded that I was hanging in there, but that I could do some help. Audrey offered to assist me with everything I required and inquired as to what I required assistance with. I said that Will could not help me since I had a lot of hospital bills to pay and wanted to borrow some cash. While saying it, my voice was shaking. Audrey spoke up right away about my tragic situation without being prompted, and Audrey assured me that they could give me the loan. She questioned how much I required, and I said that I required roughly $15,000. I felt humiliated that I had to rely so heavily on my friend's generosity. According to Audrey, there was no issue at all. She promised that the money will be deposited into my account that day. I expressed my appreciation for the assistance, and I expressed my gratitude to Audrey and explained that, without her and Nick, I didn't know what I would do. Audrey just reassured me that they were there for me and that I didn't need to worry. Nick, who had been listening in, even offered to pick up and drop off my kids from school, relieving me of the additional burden. Knowing that I had my friend's support made me feel as though a burden had been lifted off my shoulders. Grateful for his offer, I thanked Nick and accepted his offer, telling him that he was very kind. He said that it wasn't a problem at all and that both he and Audrey were happy to help in any single way that they could. Well, Audrey also agreed to visit me a few times per week just to assist me with household tasks and simply spending time with me. I was appreciative of the companionship and the assistance, and it was comforting to know that I wasn't struggling in silence. While I was busy picking up my life and simply getting the pieces together, I noticed that Will was growing more and more distant. He had responded well to Nick and Audrey's offer and seemed relieved that he wouldn't have to cart the kids to and from the school anymore. I had also informed him coldly that I had taken care of the hospital bill and that with the advance payment I've gotten from the publisher, I would pull my weight and start contributing to the expenses again. He'd seemed thrilled upon hearing the news and had said it was great I was coming out of my depressed funk. Well, I was angry when he put it like that, but too tired to even argue at that point. I could see that my marriage was breaking apart in front of my eyes. It hurt me deeply, considering that Will had been the cause of all of this, having caused my accident, and he seemed to feel no sense of remorse or responsibility anymore. It was like the previous Will had vanished and had been replaced by a stranger. Update. One day, a few weeks later, when Audrey and I chatted on the couch about the mundane life affairs and what's going on in the outside world, well, I became aware that Audrey seemed strange. She appeared to be having difficulties, and it's obvious from the expression on herself and her face. When I learned that Will had been seen by Nick with different women that morning, the information hit me like an absolute ton of bricks. My mind raced with questions as I tried to understand what she was saying. They were seen at the convenience store close to the school. It was subsequently confirmed. Audrey looked at me, recognizing the effect the news had on me, her face a mixture of concern and sympathy. I just sat there in shock and pain. How could he hurt me so terribly and in such a vile, disgusting manner? He was cheating on me after everything we had been through? Audrey sat next to me as I sobbed and contemplated what had transpired. I knew that she would help me through this since she, would be there for me, but I felt so crushed and betrayed by Will that it was almost unbearable. I was unable to think as Audrey told me the news. I felt as though I had been punched in the stomach and was unable to breathe. I had never even considered the possibility of Will cheating on me. I'd complete faith in him, and he had betrayed that trust. I was beyond comfort, and despite Audrey's best efforts to comfort me, I had the impression that everything in my life was absolutely imploding, and I had no idea how I was going to handle this realization. I sat on the couch for hours after Audrey departed, my thoughts whirling. The more I thought about the incident and played it over in my thoughts, the more devastated I became. I could not believe Will had turned against me in this manner. I had to force myself to wake up and face the day eventually. I couldn't allow this news to stop me from finishing the work I had to complete. Yet, as the day wore on, I discovered that I was having trouble concentrating. Every time I attempted to write, my thoughts would wander to Will and that woman from the convenience store. Was she prettier than me? Was it because of my newfound disability? I was at a loss for what to do. Do I need to confront him? Should I try to forget what happened and act as nothing happened? I felt nauseous at the notion of either choice. No, I concluded I had to exact my revenge. I may have been entitled to petty revenge, but after everything he had me go through, I deserved it. To gather the proof, I was required to challenge him. I needed to learn more. Afterward, I called Audrey and asked her whether she could assist me with something. I hesitated before asking, concerned about whether my request would be too much. Sympathetically, she replied that of course she could, and asked me what I needed. I replied that I needed to get evidence of Will's affair, ironclad proof. Initially hesitant, she soon agreed and asked me how she could do that if I had a plan. I said that I needed her to ask Nick to follow Will and photograph him, with the other woman, of course, and I said that I could not do it alone. I needed to prove him and just confront him. She said that she would talk to Nick and see what they would do. Well, a few days later, Nick came to my house with a manila envelope in his hand. "I got you what you asked for," he said while handing me the envelope. As soon as I eagerly opened it, I discovered the photos Nick had taken of Will with the additional women. When I stared at them, I experienced mixed emotions of rage and despair. My chest was empty and my heart felt absolutely torn out. I thanked Nick profusely, telling him that thanks to him I could finally have some closure. He reiterated that he and Audrey were always going to be there for me, and to just call him if I needed something else done. The next step was to get in touch with the emergency services. I inhaled deeply before dialing the hospital's number, and after a few rings, the operator picked up. And I requested to speak with the emergency personnel who cared for me the day of my injury. My call was transferred, and a man's voice responded not long after. I introduced myself as Erica, and informed the person on the other end of the line that I had recently been involved in an accident. I requested some information and tried to maintain a steady tone while making the request. Jake, the person on the other end of the phone, responded by introducing himself as Jake and offering to help. I explained that I was trying to locate the first responder who had cared for me the day of the accident. Jake then informed me that he and his group were responsible for saving me and taking me to the hospital. As I heard Jake's voice, I recognized the voice of the man who had helped me on that fateful day, and I felt a stab of recognition. I expressed my gratitude and told Jake that I remembered them and how fantastic they were in the moment. I then asked if he could help refresh my memory about a few events from that day. I questioned Jake about his memories of what transpired, and he told me that they would be more than pleased to assist. Before responding, he was silent for a few seconds. Jake responded slowly and recounted what my husband had told them about the accident. According to my husband's admission, he had coerced me into trying something that was far too advanced for me and had not taken no for an answer, so it was his fault that I had the accident. I expressed my gratitude and never asked for Jake's help. I needed him to testify in court and confirm my husband was responsible indeed for my accident. I told him that I wanted to make sure that my husband paid for his actions. As I made this request, my voice shook with emotion. Jake was understanding and supportive. He promised to help me and assured me that I could count on him. He said that he would be there when and where I needed him to testify. I thanked him and hung up the phone, feeling grateful for his willingness to help me in my time of need. It was time to make Will pay for all his actions. Update. Final update posted by OP. Well. So, we hired a lawyer, filed for divorce, and asked for alimony and spousal support on the grounds that his adultery had emotionally damaged me. For causing my accident, I also made the decision just to sue him. Yeah, sue him. It's time to recoup every penny I've spent while in the hospital and after being released. Even though I didn't know how much it would cost, I was prepared to go through with the procedures in order to hold him responsible for what he's done. Although the whole procedure was unpleasant, I was determined to finish it. I was certain I'd prevail in the case since I had Nick's photographic evidence. My friends and family, who had been by my side during the entire struggle, had also offered their support. Following everything that occurred, I was unable to endure living in the same house as Will. I packed my bags, told him what I've done, and left after filing the lawsuits. He began to sob and repeatedly apologize after being taken aback. But I was unable to forgive him so quickly. Following his involvement in my accident, he cheated on me. How could I ever trust him again? I advised him to lie in his bed because he had already made it. He had treated me horribly in return for everything I've done for him. In a marriage without love and trust, I could not stay. It was time for me to move on and concentrate on my family, especially my kids. I experienced a sense of relief and liberation as I left the house. I felt like I had control over my life for the first time in a very long time. When I learned that Will had dumped his girlfriend, I was shocked. At first I didn't believe it, but then he started calling me nonstop, sending flowers, and just shopping up at my place. He kept apologizing for everything that happened between us because he was deeply sorry. I was unsure of how to reply, despite the fact that I knew he was attempting to win me back. I had the desire to pardon him and accept him back. After all, we'd been friends for a very long time and had many memorable experiences together. A different part of me, though, felt hurt and enraged by what he's done. I was unable to ignore the incident and the harm that he was responsible for. Will persisted in making showy gestures in an effort to win me back. I had the desire to pardon him and accept him back. After all, we had been friends for a very long time and had many memorable experiences together. A different part of me, though, felt hurt and enraged by what he has done to me. I was unable to ignore the incident and the harm he was responsible for. Will persisted in making showy gestures in an effort to win me back. He would organize romantic excursions, buy me costly gifts, and try to take me out to dinner. He even apologized profusely in a lengthy letter to me, vowing to remedy the wrongs he's caused. He was sincere in this regret and was prepared to go to any lengths to put things right, as I could see. But despite his best efforts, I was unable to accept my forgiveness for him. I was aware that I needed to let the past go and concentrate on being better. I made it clear to Will that I could not take him back despite all of his attempts. I don't want to spend time with someone who had brought me such anguish and pain. He kept reminding me of the incidents and accidents which prevented me from focusing on myself and my own recovery. Predictably, Will lost both lawsuits and I recovered all the money along with the extra money he was forced to pay me for the damages and spousal support. We split custody of the kids and I moved into a new house where I focused on my writings and my rehabilitation. After 2 long years of physical therapy, I was finally able to walk again. I moved on, with a new life and a clean slate, whereas Will, well, he was left to wallow in his misery. Oh boy, this story got sticky quick. We're talking about a divorce and many other things that led to this, but I do want to know from you guys, do you think the accident was Will's fault? go ahead and drop your comments down below. We know how Nick went ahead and caught Will with the photographs and what transpired after that. Basically, Will being caught guilty for causing the accident. Do you guys agree with that though? Or do you think, hey, she's the one who actually decided to do the flip, and she's the one who broke her back? Will didn't push her off a cliff or down a hill or anything like that. There were mixed emotions in the comment section. Some people were saying one thing while others were arguing with the others, but I would like to hear from you guys. So drop it down in the comment section. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every single day and animate them, so make sure you subscribe if you're into that kind of thing. You guys have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.